Travis Tougaw, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back on and catch up because last time we checked in on what was obviously going to be a very busy year for you.
Mhm.
I assume that has nothing has changed, right? It sounds like things are quite busy.
Yep, we've stayed busy this year. So Foxholes came out in January, and that's been a lot of fun. And then Captives, the second book in the series, came out in June. So not a lot of lead time after Foxholes. It kept me on my toes. And then we just got the audiobook for Foxholes out about a week ago. So it's been a lot going on.
Yeah, that's great. And then the third book is right around the corner.
Yes, Last Call is the third book in the series, and it will be coming out in November.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, first of all, before we kind of get into our what I'll call marquee topic, and we want to talk about the decision to go to conferences,
Mhm.
big name, nationally known conferences like Thriller Fest, where you recently went, and we will get into the pros and cons of that as sort of our main discussion point, because I think a lot of writers go through the process of evaluating the cost and evaluating what they think they might get out of it, particularly if they haven't
Mhm.
been before. But the main thing is to also, we want to make sure folks know about your series and what the books entail. And folks can go back to the previous podcast from 5 or 6 months ago or so, and I'll put a link to that one in the
Mhm.
show notes for this one, because I think we did get into a fair amount of detail, but set us up and tell us what these three books involve.
Sure. So Foxholes is about Vince Marcotte, who's an Air Force veteran. He's been out of the service for a while and sees a campaign ad for a Senate candidate in Colorado, who he recognizes as an officer that he served with in the military. They were both in Afghanistan at the same time, and he thinks that this officer has a shady past that should disqualify him from public office. And so Vince takes it upon himself to investigate it, and then some danger ensues, and the candidate is obviously not thrilled with Vince's decisions. And so that's kind of the crux of it is, can Vince derail this campaign before he gets derailed? And so that was a lot of fun writing that one. I drew a lot from my own military background and my own time in Afghanistan, writing that one. And then it set itself up nicely for a series. There were some other characters who emerged in the writing of it. And so book two sees Vince joining a private detective agency with a detective named Eddie Fleck and another friend named Hadley Collins. And so, book two, Captives, is a missing persons case that takes us out to eastern Colorado, and it tells some of Hadley's backstory. So there's a modern day case going on where they're trying to find a child who's been missing for 15 years, but then there's also some flashbacks to Hadley's own childhood, and we learn more about her. And then book three is a murder case, looking at another cold case, trying to prove someone's innocence after 20 years. Um, the wrinkle in this one is that the person that was put away in jail was convicted in part by an investigation that Eddie, their other detective partner, did when he was a police officer in Denver Police Department. So that causes some friction within the agency, and they're having to try to work together and determine who they can trust. And there are a lot of different themes that come up with that one. So it was a lot of fun writing that one too. I'm really looking forward to getting that one out.
Yeah. Sounds great. And I mean, it must be exciting to see this career in the course of just a few months to go from a year ago, zero books out, correct? And here we
Mm-hmm.
are in between book two and book three. Yeah, tell folks again how this all came about. Just give us the overview.
Yeah, so I wrote the first book, Foxholes, in 2021, and spent most of that year writing it, and then started shopping it around, found an agent, and then got the contract for the book last March. And when Cindy, my agent, sent the contract to me, she asked me if I felt like the book had series potential. And I told her that it did, even though I hadn't written any other books yet. I had gone off on a different project. And so Black Rose Writing, the publisher, offered us a 3-book deal. So we took it, but they wanted all 3 books in 2023, which meant I had to write 2 more books in a year, which I recommend that everyone does at least once, just for the experience, and then never do it again. But you should all try it once just for
And what was that like? I mean, kind of nerve-wracking. What?
Deadlines are a great motivator for me. I find I can be really efficient if I know I've got a hard deadline coming, and so it was somewhat stressful, but it was a fun stress. No one was going to die as a result of this, right? The stakes weren't all that high. So it was, it's doing something I love, which is writing. And it forced me to say, yes, I'm dedicating some time every day to make sure I hit my word count so that I can have this first draft done when I need it to be done, so I can get it to the publisher when I need to.
Yeah. If I remember correctly from the last chat, you really keep a pretty disciplined schedule of it. You were keeping then, I think, 1,000 words a day and 2,000 on the weekends, which I
Mm-hmm.
think was a 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of 2,000. Have you upped your pace for this new situation?
No, I've kept to that pace. That rhythm feels pretty good, and it's what typically my work schedule and family schedule allows for. So, um, yeah, I've kept to that. I'm editing another project right now, so I'm not in the writing mode. But I do the same thing with editing. I set a certain number of words or pages that I want to get through each day, so that I you know don't let it hang out there forever. I want to always keep it moving forward, keep it getting better.
Right, right. Nice. You can up your limit. I recently upped my limit, my daily word production count, and I was always a 500 words a day guy. I thought that
Mhm.
was all I could manage, and I recently decided to bump it up, and I doubled it. And I guess I'm here to second your thesis. It can be done. You can ramp things up, and 1,000 words
Mhm.
a day adds up pretty quickly. And um, obviously, it's not all about speed. In your case, it was about speed because you had a deadline. But it's just simply like a lot of things, a matter of will. Now, I'm not saying I could go to 2,000 like your weekends. I don't think I could do that, but maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, I end up breaking the weekends up into 2 sessions. So I do a morning session and an evening one. So that ends up working out. But,
Yeah.
and I know we're going to talk about the conference, but while I was at Thriller Fest, Walter Mosley was there, and one of the questions that came up for him was how often do you write? And he said 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And he's prolific, obviously, so he's found a rhythm that works for him.
Yep. Very prolific and also a terrific, honest, down to earth, approachable
Mm-hmm.
guy.
Yeah.
I got to sit next to him at 2 Edgar Award banquets in New York, and
Mm-hmm.
just the most fascinating guy, charming, interesting. The
Mm-hmm.
conversation just went all these different directions. It was great. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, so you last call is done, the one that comes out in November. That's being edited or being prepped. Where's that?
Yep. So we've gone through editing, and we've got a cover, and so we're doing some early reviews now, and just we're in pre-order, and so really just the waiting game at this point.
Yeah. And then what's beyond last call? What's next after that?
Yep. So I've got a manuscript that's with my agent now that she's shopping around, and then I've got another project that I'm just finishing, that I'm really excited about, that I'll be sending over to her after I get the final, I's dotted and T's crossed. I'll get that over to Cindy here hopefully in the next few weeks. And then I'm thinking about writing a 4th book in the series. I thought that Last Call was the last book. which is why I called it Last Call.
Yeah,
But another idea has emerged, and I like the characters, so I may go back to that one and see if we can do a fourth book with Black Rose.
that's great. Well, you mentioned Cindy real quickly. Let's give her a shout out. What's her full name and what agency?
Yeah. Cindy Bullard at Birch Literary. So she's out of North Carolina and is a great agent and great advocate for her writers.
How did you find her?
I found her on the manuscript wish list website and just looking for agents who looked like they were interested in the kind of writing that I was doing. And she came up as someone who was doing crime and thrillers. And I looked at her profile and seemed like the type of person that I could work with. And I'm really glad that it worked out with us.
Great. Um, let's talk about marketing. I mean, you've been so
Mhm.
busy writing. You probably also, because Foxholes came out in earlier this year, you've also spent some time, I assume, just doing the basics of marketing with online things and um, social media, I assume, to a fair
Mhm.
extent. But then there's also the in-person stuff, and I sort of categorize these in two different camps because the online stuff, there's always an opportunity to write checks and have people do marketing stuff for you online, and all
Mhm.
sorts of offers coming in the door as soon as you publish a book saying we can help you become a bestseller and et cetera. But the in-person things are different, I think, because they take time. You can still be productive if you're disciplined like you and keep writing. Um, but they sort of change your rhythm. They get you out of the house, of course. You get to go meet readers and or other writers. Talk to me a little bit about how you approached this new phase of your career in terms of making decisions and the decision to go to Thriller Fest in New York City, not a cheap commitment, correct?
Right. Yeah, it's not a cheap conference, and New York City is not a cheap place to go. But it was something early on. I decided to do it when I joined International Thriller Writers and started reading up on the conference and just looking at the lineups of who they've had there in the past. I mean, it's a really good opportunity just to hear from the best of the best. And then the other thing that really clinched the decision for me is International Thriller Writers does a lot of support for authors, and one of the programs they have for support is their debut authors program, which I qualified for with Foxholes. So um, they do some things for their authors, like they'll put recommendations for your books in their newsletter, and just offer different seminars and helps. And at the Thriller Fest, they give the debut authors an opportunity to get on stage and talk about their book. So we had the debut authors breakfast the Saturday of Thriller Fest, which was a lot of fun. There were 28 of us up on stage, and we each got a minute to two to tell everybody who we are and what we wrote, and they put our picture up on the big screen with the cover of our book, and it was a lot of fun. Really, really good experience. I'm really glad that I did that.
Yeah. I've seen that sort of same event at the BoucherCon and or
Mm-hmm.
Left Coast Crime, where they do something very similar with the debut authors and they each get a minute. And it's usually a very big crowd. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
probably hundreds and hundreds of folks in the crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would guess we had 400 to 500 people in the crowd.
Yeah.
So my first thought was, what have I gotten myself into? And then my
Yeah.
second thought was, okay, what am I going to say? Because I thought I knew, but I want to make sure this is good since this many people are here. But
Yeah.
yeah, it went over really well, and everyone was very kind and welcoming. And it's interesting. I mean, the book industry, as you probably know, like it can be a hard place. It can be a really cutthroat business, and it's hard to succeed in it. But the people who are in the industry are all great. I mean, I haven't come across a single writer or anyone who's not willing to share their time, not willing to talk and give a tip, give a critique. Everyone is very welcoming and hospitable, and I found that to be true at the Thriller Fest as well. So that definitely made it worthwhile.
I co-sign that statement 1,000%. The people are just fantastic. Yeah,
Mhm.
really great. So are you willing to share just general round numbers about kind of just thinking about airfare, hotel? Uh, and I ask in the spirit of trying to help other writers, on the negative side is that's a whole lot of dollars. And if you say to yourself, in order to justify this, I have to sell X number of books because then here's what my percentage is for each book that I make. Or and on the pro side though is this unknown. You're going to go to New York, you're going to be in a room or in a hotel crawling with the people that you want to be a part of this community and you want to get to know people in this community. You can network like crazy. You can start building friendships. You've got these, expense versus reward, risk reward. Can you talk generally? How much money did this cost you? If you don't mind, and if I am putting you on the spot, you can duck. And what was your thought process, or was it just something like this is if you're going to be a serious author, you're going to go do these kinds of things?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't remember the exact costs because registration was a while back, and we booked the hotel room as soon as I registered to make sure I got one. So I would say, overall, once you factor in, hotel, airfare, cost of the conference, it's several $100s. Probably approaching four digits by the time all is said and done. Um, but you can't go in, at least my perspective is you can't go in with the perspective of there's going to be a dollar for dollar return on investment, that I'm going to sell X number of books and then I'll get all of my money back, because a conference like that is really not about that, unless you've already got a really, really big name and people are coming to see you. It's really about the intangibles. Part of it is about building your profile and building credibility for yourself as an author. And it may not be for the book that you're working on now. It may be for two, three, four books down the road, that as you continue to build this base, that right, you start getting a name that's known to people, and you become a trusted author, and people will buy a book because you wrote it. But you're certainly not there in your first, one, two, three books. So you can't expect, I would say, if you go into the conference expecting to get that sort of ROI, you're going to come away very disappointed. Um,
Yeah.
but if you go in thinking this is for the intangibles, right? This is for me to network and meet people. This is for me to get my name out there. This is to learn more about the craft, learn more about the industry, then it is definitely worth it. And I found all of those things to be delivered in spades while I was there. It was a really great opportunity. I will definitely think about going again. Depending on the timing of it next year, I'll definitely look at it and see if it's something that I can swing again.
Give us some specifics, if you could, about the intangibles. Can you mention a few little interactions or encounters?
Yeah, so one, just the debut author program was really good. So we had a dinner all together on Friday night, before the breakfast on Saturday, and it was just a really good opportunity to sit around the table with other people who are in the same boat that you're in, and be able to trade stories and hear what experiences are with other publishers. And so, if there's something where you thought, well, my publisher's asking me to do this thing for marketing, and that sounds weird to me, and someone else is, yeah, my publisher's asking me to do the same thing, then it feels a little less weird. And so it's good to know that there are other people who are walking in your shoes and experiencing the same things that you're experiencing. And I made some good friends out of that. Some spending a few hours around the table with other writers, hearing about their books and getting to know them. And there are writers that I'm still keeping in touch with as a result of that. So that was definitely worthwhile. There are, in our digital world, we meet people online and through social media. And so I got to meet a couple of them in person while I was in New York. And so that was really good to be able to actually, talk to a person and not just an avatar on a screen, and be able to get to know them. And actually, one of them, I'll throw out his name because he's so helpful for authors. Jeff Circle, he does the Writer's Dossier. He's always promoting writers and just a great guy. So he was one of the people I was looking forward to meeting there, and got to spend a little bit of time with him. And then even after the conference was over, he sent me a note and said, "Hey, there's a publicist I think that you should talk to." And so starting to build a network that way. And as you meet people who know people and they introduce you, then the next thing you know, your network that was non-existent before you went to the conference, you've got several people in it. And so that's a real tangible benefit that I think for any author, especially someone who's just starting out, would get from going to an event like that.
Yeah, I think those are great examples. Exactly. Yep. Very good. It's still, how did you find your sort of overall uh nerves going into that? Just were you a little overwhelmed at first, or just you're just one of those guys that's very comfortable to approach something like that and just start chatting?
Yeah. So the whole thing was a little overwhelming. The one, I'd never been to New York before,
Oh, wow.
so
Okay.
that's an experience in itself.
Yep.
Um, and then so all of the bright lights and the traffic, and I mean Denver's not a small city, but it's not New York.
Yeah.
So that is an experience in itself. And then I found that having like the informal mixers, like the dinner on Friday, was a good preparation for the Saturday conference. That I already knew people, we'd talked in an informal setting, and so I felt better about presenting with them on Saturday, as I'd gotten to know people a little better. And then being an into the alphabet guy, as a Tougaw, they did everything alphabetically. So I was number 27 of 28 presenters. So I got to hear what everyone else was saying and be able to evaluate what I planned to say and think, okay, do I need to tweak anything, and make sure that, I'm going to be appropriate for the conversation that's going on. So that was kind of a hidden advantage that I had too.
Yeah. Excellent. By any chance, did you come home with an armload of books, what like I usually do from a conference?
Yes, there were had a great bookstore there, and too many good books to pass up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Was there any one particular thriller writer that you wanted to meet who you made a point of buttonholing?
So I didn't get to talk with her for a long time, but the one I wanted to make sure I met was Louise Penny.
Oh,
She's the Canadian author, a mystery author, the Detective Gamache series, and she is my wife's favorite author. And so I got a book for my wife, and made sure that Louise signed it. But we got to chat for a few minutes, and she's just an incredibly generous person, and so kind and insightful. And so that was a nice couple of minutes getting to chat about writing with her.
yeah, she is super gracious and just
Mhm.
unaffected, just amazing. But yeah,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah,
nice.
and I didn't meet either of them, but I mentioned Walter Mosley before. One of He wrote a book a long time ago called something like "This Year You'll Write Your Novel," and it is probably the best book about writing that I've ever read. Where he just lays it out for you and says, "Here's how to write a novel in a year, and these are the phases that you're going to go through. January through March, this is what you should be doing. Then in April, here's what it looks like." And to hear him, like one of the things he talks about in that book is having a regular writing schedule. And so to hear him on stage say that he makes sure he writes for 3 hours every day of the year, and to know that he's practicing what he put in his book was good to hear, and just a living legend there. So hearing him talk is always a great experience. Um,
Yeah,
and then the
for
other one
sure.
was Dennis Lehane, was interviewed there as a spotlight guest, and he gave a great interview. And one of the things that came up when we were talking about people, walking in your shoes, the famous authors, right, the ones who have made it, have the same problems that the rest of us do, and so that's good to hear too. Like Dennis mentioned that he has, 5 to 10 unfinished novels that he just can't figure out that he's got in the shelf, that he hasn't been able to do anything with. And so to hear someone who's as accomplished as he is be able to say, there are times where I just give up and move on to the next project. For the rest of us, it says, okay, we can be a little gracious to ourselves, and go easy when an idea doesn't work out, because even the best of us have these problems.
Yep. Yep. Again, another person. I mean, that's something we talked earlier about how friendly everybody is, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say there are a couple of writers who, they might show up on stage for their interview and don't hang around, but the vast majority do. And
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Lehane at BoucherCon a couple of years ago, I think it was the Toronto one, um, and boy, that guy just hung out in the bar. Everybody was going up to chat with him for a while. He was in no hurry to go anywhere. All the writers just shooting the breeze with Dennis Lehane, and he was sharing all his insights. And he was equally as interested in you as you were in him, which is like head scratching. And
Mm-hmm.
but very real. Yeah, great guy, great guy.
Yeah.
Yep. Have you read a lot of Dennis Lehane? Have you read a lot of Walter Mosley? Have you read much Louise Penny?
I've read some of Dennis Lehane. I haven't read all of his, but I've read a few, and a few by Walter Mosley as well. I've not read any of Louise Penny's, but I will get there eventually. My wife is a much faster reader than I am, so she'll read, over 100 books in a year. And this year I'm on pace to maybe hit 50 if I pick it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So Louisa's books are all in a series, and so that's when you get to like number 19 or 20 in a series. For a slow reader like me, that becomes a significant investment. It's like, okay, am I going to give most of my year to catching up on this series? So I will eventually, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Nice. Very good. Wow. Well, this has been great. I mean, really appreciate this sort of insight into the what went into your decision around some of the big marketing opportunities that come along. Have you done much other in-person appearances, bookstores, libraries, other things like that, book clubs?
No, and I did a book launch party for Foxholes, at my house for friends and family, and so that was fun. But they had to buy the book, like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't get an excuse. I've did
Yeah.
a couple of things at a local Barnes and Noble that were somewhat slow. So that's it's always a mixed bag. You don't know what traffic is going to be like, and who's going to stop by, and if they're actually going to buy a book or not. But it's good to do them. It's good to give it a shot, and see what comes out of it. And again, I don't think you shouldn't look at it as I've got to sell X number of books at this to be successful. It's really about the experience and broadening your profile and your credibility as a writer.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to do those stand around the bookstore kind of deals with a table and hope to snag readers, but it is, you never know. Yeah, and some days
Yeah.
are great and some days are a push. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, as we wrap this up, we always like to ask our guests we've already mentioned quite a few authors and things like that, but maybe there's one more author or a book you want to suggest that folks check out.
Yes. So one of my fellow debut authors who was at the breakfast in New York, and she's a Colorado writer, and she's also with Black Rose Writing, is Carla Saylor. And her debut book came out this past year called A Place Unmade. It's an environmental thriller, and it's just really beautifully written. Great characters, great storyline. It looks at what happens if the world's food supply were to be threatened. And so, really interesting plot, and she put a lot of research into it, and just a great debut novel. So check out Carla's book, and you'll be glad that you did.
Excellent. Sounds a little thrillerish and maybe a little dystopian or
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not quite dystopian, but yeah, there's a lot of different genres in it. There's thriller, crime, a little bit of romance. So it's really nicely done. She blended things together really well.
Excellent. Well, Travis, thanks so much. Good luck when book 3 comes out in November, the last call, and good luck with the whole series and all your future projects.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.